Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of SurrealTube here at Scary Stories We Tell. I am one of your hosts, Chris Stashew.
And I am the other one of those, Emma.
There's two of us. And I am the other one.
Of
the
those.
place where we are where we are, or whatever the hell Yellow Guy said. If you've been following along with us, we've been watching a little show called Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared, which originally started out as a YouTube series, and then it morphed into a real show on the real internet that you can watch if you're so inclined, and you should be. The internet. And I guess, at this point, if you're following along with us, we're very near the end. We're in the penultimate episode of the first season, possible only season, remains to be seen. Again, we don't know. It took them a very long time to get to this point. So I would hope it doesn't take another 10 years. But again, this is like still brand new. It was October of last year. So we're going to be talking about the 5th episode of Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared, aptly titled Transport. Our three friends meet yet another teacher who is
train guy.
The worst one yet, frankly, in a lot of ways.
No, Lily and Todney were the worst.
He's terrible in a different way.
Horrible, actually. Now that
it's varying degrees of horrible, because he's like, I don't understand what he is, frankly.
Okay, so he's obviously supposed to encompass the idea of transportation as a whole. And so he's able to transform and morph into all different types of transport vehicles, car and plane, boat and submarine, in order to show our trio what it means to be transported, I assume.
Or the history of transportation. It's clearly meant to be Thomas the Tank Engine, right?
Is it?
I guess when I think of choo-choo trains that talk, there's only one that I can think of.
As soon as I saw Choo Choo, all I could think was Choo Choo Charles, which is that new like indie horror game. You have to see things. I need to show you things.
Are you talking about the Thomas the Train Engine game? Isn't that like a horror?
No.
Isn't that what you're talking about? It's like a horror game with like a Thomas the Train character, right?
Big spider train.
Right.
Yeah. That's Choo Choo Charles.
I mean, that's inspired by Thomas the Tank Engine, right? I'm assuming that's what this is. This is a pretty direct send up of that kid's show.
I think it's only because of the placement of the face.
Where else do you put a face on a train?
But that's what I'm saying. It's like, how much of it could it really be? Like, oh yes, this is a callback to Thomas the Tank Engine. When it's just like, the only similar things here is it is a train and it has a face.
And it has the same color scheme.
Does it?
It's blue and yellow.
Oh.
Thomas is blue and yellow.
Those are like the two of the three primary colors.
Hey, you know what? I'm surprised that Thomas the Tank Engine is not what you thought of, because that's like, again,
never watched it as a kid. So.
That's fair. It's. I mean, again, like a show about kids shows, sending up kids shows. I'm surprised it's taken this long to do something that's so direct, because again, they haven't done Barney or Teletubbies or anything else, but
they haven't needed to,
right? And I mean, I don't think they do here, and obviously the direction that they go ends up deviating pretty far away pretty quickly, because he's a choo-choo train for like 2 seconds, frankly. Like,
yeah,
starts out as a little train and then becomes effectively a horrifying person in a train suit.
I mean, we missed out on what Time Child or something.
Yeah, the Time Child shows up at one point looking for our trio because they went out on the road. This is the first time we've seen outside, like traveling outside. I don't know, like
this is the first time we've seen them travel.
Right, because like even when we saw them in the Love episode, they were outside, but they weren't walking around. It was just yellow guys in a tree and they're having a picnic. Like,
yeah. I mean, like in the Death episode, like they were outside to bury Duck, but like they never showed how they got there. Obviously, with Lily and Todney in the family episode, they also just sort of showed up there. This is the first time that they showed a large expanse of the environment, I suppose.
Theoretically, possibly.
Maybe, yeah.
Who knows? It's a weird episode because the first 3/4 of the episode, the first 9/10 of the episode is pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
And then
par for the course.
Yeah, and then when we come back from the kind of little intermission that they always do, it just goes in a very strange direction.
Off the rails.
Hey.
Sorry. Anyway,
it's weird because we were talking on the last episode about whether or not they would address like the reality of the show and because again, we talked about in the last episode, Red Guy, the actor who played him with the hat with the head coming off, like there were plenty of things that this show has done to show us that there may be a reality sub beyond this one that we're not seeing, and now fucking confirmed it more or less at the end of this episode, right?
That reality plays an actual role in the context of the show itself.
Right.
That self-awareness, it was baked into the latter half, I would say, of the original YouTube series. Specifically, like I would say the last episode and a half of the YouTube series. And I guess that's sort of, honestly, now that I'm saying it out loud, the second half of the second to last episode is where things started to break down.
Yeah, when he starts eating duck, right?
And so it's almost as if it was following that same formula of like, well, they've established the world up until this specific point, and now they're ready to fourth wall break, like more than they had been, making it more than like making it a true plot point that they're deviating from the type of system that they've created for themselves. It's interesting. The timing is a little uncanny.
Well, I think with a show like this, even again, because we talked about this in the last episode, like who's watching this, right? Is the audience for this show effectively just people like us who saw, whenever they saw the YouTube series, they saw it, and then they were like, oh my God, this is finally, there's something else? Or was it people who were finding this for the first time? Because if people are finding this for the first time, they don't know any of that, right? They don't know that there's a fourth wall break. They don't know any of that stuff. It seems to them on the level, right? There really hasn't been a whole lot of any of this up until this point. Like a little bit in the last episode, a little bit, but like again, the show, like you said, more or less is presenting itself as a kid's show. It is maintaining that reality that it's a kid's show, even if the message is strange. There's no breaking through, peering through the peephole stuff that we're used to with the series, I guess, at the end of the series, the way it was before. So I guess they're just doing it again because it worked before. Or maybe they're also assuming people didn't see it before and they want to do it again in a different way. But is it really different though? That's the question. Like, is it different? Is that what you're? Yeah. Is what they're doing different than last time, or is it effectively kind of the same gimmick?
I guess it remains to be seen. I think it's less, is it the same, and more so, are they going to do the same thing with it?
Right.
That's what I want to know. Is it going to be like the same message of, this is actually like in the universe, this is a kid show that's being created. It's a meta narrative on kid shows. Or are they going to be doing something more with it that we haven't seen yet? I would argue that if it is following the same timeline, roughly, they're doing that for a reason. And they might be doing it specifically to cue us in as prior audience members. Because, obviously, they are taking into account both audiences.
Right.
They wanted to make something that they knew that people could just like come in and see for the first time. But they also, I think, wanted to drop in the little lore and the little extra bits, little callbacks just for us who have seen it.
Like Roy's eye in the beginning.
Same as Pesky Bee.
And Roy in this episode, effectively.
And yeah, Roy was in this episode very, very briefly. There were a lot of weird symbols in this episode.
Well, you have Yellow Guy having a dream that, again, like he
lives in a community, Newtown.
Right. And it's what would happen if they got where they were going, but were led to believe by the way the episode ends that there may not be anywhere to go.
Well, okay. They were setting up this idea with, I think it comes back to Girlton and Habris. I think they were using that as this allegory. So like he was, Red Guy was saying in the car while they were driving, after things were starting to like break down, the console was no longer working, so Duck couldn't continue to watch the show, which, by the way, would kill my motion sickness. I could never.
I hear you.
But Duck saying like, I won't know how it ends. And Red Guy really hammers home this idea of like, it always ends the same way. And then they always start back up at the house the next episode.
Right.
And he made that really clear. And at the tail end of the episode where, there was like this weird cutaway that almost showed like a weird like third party person moving a car next to a house, and it had like this narration reiterating that same point that they'll end up back where they started.
The journey always ends up back at home, I think, is even, I mean, again, like that's a TV show for you in a lot of ways, right? Like most sitcoms, they go in a circle. Like how many episodes of The Simpsons or other cartoons or TV shows is just, oh, we had this crazy thing, but now we're just back to the status quo. So it's
the lack of consequences.
Right. Yeah.
Not every show follows that formula. There are tons of shows that have a full narrative that goes the entire time, episode to episode, and everything that's happened previously matters. And I think what we were talking about in a recent episode of us talking about this is wondering, is that going to be the path that this show takes? Is it going to continue resetting? We were already talking about this, which I think was really interesting, because I didn't think that this would be like a massive point that they were trying to make, but I'm starting to wonder if it could be, which is this idea of, are they actually going to continue, starting it from the beginning every time, or will there be some weird meta narrative that they wove in there? And we were sort of batting back and forth the idea of like, maybe there's a meta narrative, maybe there won't be. I won't really mind if there is or isn't. And I think they were setting us up for that in a weird way, to really make us believe that it was just going to be purely episodic, and it wasn't going to be some, weird arc or through line. And it's now like, joking with us, saying like, you thought, haha, tricked you again. You thought, no, there is something deeper going on here. And there is something more we're going to talk about here. And that subverting of expectations yet again, they did it again in another really cool, thought-provoking way. So I got to give them props, because like I said, we were already thinking like, was that going to be where they take this? And it looks like they are, and still not in the way that I thought they would.
Well, and that's the thing, similar to yourself, it's been a concern since we saw it in the first season, that it's like, all right, so you've kind of shown us this little trick that you're going to do with the characters, and they're different colors now, or they're not actually there, and it is a puppet. It's not a person or a duck in that context. It is just a puppet. I think they've kind of shown it already, and I think, like yourself, I was really concerned that it was going to be just more of the same ground being tread. I don't know where they're going or what they're doing. It's weird to see a hand pushing their car back to their house with the journey always ends up back at home. And mind you, they're not in the car though, but I mean,
it's supposed to represent it.
Right. I don't think
very clearly.
Right. I don't think it matters if it shows them or not, because I don't know what they're trying to say about these kinds of shows though. Like I don't know what their message is they're trying to get across, but I appreciate that they are continuing to push the expectations that I have with this narrative in interesting ways, like ultimately the way this episode ends. And even, I mean, here's, another thing that we've kind of seen a little bit of in every episode, but they do it really well here. Mediums changing. I mean, they have a full animated section in this episode, which is really well done.
Mm-hmm. All of the morphing.
Yeah, all the morphing, and it's just like, it's a constant, like, dude, there's like a beat to it almost. You kind of know where it's going to go to the next one, and then the next one, and the next one, and eventually it's got to reach this kind of terminus with this character. But I just don't know, I guess for me, when we get to the end of this series, if the next season comes out, are they going to do like they did before and disregard all this stuff? Because that's the kind of thing that does bug me. And I wonder, does it bug you that they're not addressing the thing that they've already addressed? Unless this is a prequel, but again, that's just speculation. But they're not acting like what we saw in the first series happened, or they're not acknowledging it openly in this version of the show, at least.
Right. Will you be disappointed if they never do?
No, I mean, I think it's like a lot of other things like Five Nights at Freddy's and Undertale, like things where the mythology is there, but it's not the point is to entertain
it's called
you.
Deep lore.
Right. It's not like, it's not something where it's like they're clocking you over the head with it. And this they're kind of, but again, they're clocking you over the head with it, but they're not explaining it. They're just showing you these like weird things and saying, okay, it's weird. And even our characters in the show think it's weird. Because again, they end up in a kind of junkyard at the end of this episode. And even they're like, fuck do we do now?
I mean, this is I think the coolest thing about ending up where they're ending up is like, this is like the first time that they have been surrounded by non-felt materials only.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, like, I would say like the family episode, it does show like more like realism in the set design. But like, this is the first time where nothing has a face. It's very clearly a real life junkyard. Like you can tell, like it looked like nothing there was staged. It looked like the crew was like, "Hey, find us a junkyard that we can film at."
Yeah,
like,
totally. 100%. It's stark and weird juxtaposing the characters in that scenario. I mean, it'd be weird to see the characters anywhere that's not felt, given that all we've seen up until this point is felt and felt and felt and felt, or animated or CGI, but never them walking around in ostensibly our world. Again, it's not made clear.
It's so sadly our world too. Like it is the lowest of our world. It is our unwanteds. It's our trash. Like it's a very interesting place metaphorically, because you were even saying earlier, like this idea of like, you don't know like what they're going to do. Like, where are they going? Like, and I feel like that was the whole purpose of the episode, is a visual representation of where is this going? Where are we going? I think that there's a lot of visual metaphors that you can take with this show as a whole, but it's funny because the more that you put them into words and contextualize them, it's really easy to start seeing those threads. But I mean,
the show
in terms
is not
of like
subtle. I mean, the show is not subtle, but kids shows aren't subtle. I mean, that's one of the things I appreciate. One of the many things I appreciate is that kids shows aren't subtle, because kids, again, you need to just get it out with kids, like just get to the point. And I appreciate that this show is unsubtle with its kind of messaging, even if it is maybe a little on the nose, but I'll give it a pass because again, it's emulating a kid's show. Yeah,
but
I
it
agree.
is so clever about it. And that's what I love about how they weave the narrative. But it's interesting. You know, obviously the whole purpose of this episode is supposed to say, all right, we get it. We're always in this house. This is, you know, usually a catalyst will come in, somehow transport us somewhere, and then we're back at home and we never learn anything and nothing ever changes. Right. And that lack of consequences, which is pretty par for the course for most children's programming. Usually if there are consequences, they learn them in the episode, and then it's not really ever called back to. You sort of just assume that, you know, that might be a lesson that the main character will have to relearn later on, just in a different context. And that's obviously not satisfying, but it doesn't really need to be for a child. But for us, it's not satisfying. And seeing the same formula over and over and over again, how many times can you spoon feed that to us until we're like, we get it? We want to see something new. And I think in that case, we are supposed to be Red Guy in this episode. And it makes sense because Red Guy is the one arguing with the other two. The other two are like, we're enjoying this. Like, we like being at home. We like the status quo. This is where, you know, we do our stuff and this is how it happens. And we're happy with that. We're fine with that. And we're comfortable here. And Red Guy this time is the catalyst that says, I don't want to do this anymore, though. This is boring. This is bland. I want to see something new. And so I think we're supposed to be Red Guy in this episode.
Would you contend that we're supposed to be Red Guy most of the time, though, I feel like?
Probably. I mean,
the closest analog for the audience, I feel. I mean, again, he's the most humanoid, which I think kind of puts him ahead already. But I mean, the way he's treated at the end of the last season, and even in this season with the family episode where he meets his family, like, I don't know, it all felt more humanoid than anything else. Even though Yellow Guy looks like a human as well. He's humanoid. Red Guy is more humanoid just, I think, by his mannerisms.
Yes. And I think most people would argue that Yellow Guy is supposed to be the stand-in for the audience, but he's supposed to be a representation of the intended audience, not the actual audience.
Right. Who the audience actually would be were this to be an actual kids show.
Exactly. But instead, we are, right, especially in this episode, I would argue in a lot of episodes that we could all relate probably the most to Red Guy, but definitely in this episode, we are often the ones as the audience questioning the status quo. And that is what Red Guy is doing. And as soon as they're given an opportunity to escape, Duck and Yellow Guy are like, okay, that was fun. We'll go back home. Red Guy is the one that pushes. Red Guy is the one that says, no, we're going to see this through. We're going to see where this takes us. And it's interesting because then first of all, the teacher dies, which
it leads to some comedy that's pretty gold, like Duck saying, let's get out of this corpse, which is never not going to be funny. Pure bastard all the time. That's Duck for you.
I mean, it's very clear that it's supposed to be a representation of running out of gas.
Right.
Because at the very beginning, the train is introduced with drinking his special drink, which is, I immediately said oil, but it's probably just straight up gasoline. I don't know. I don't think that trains run on gasoline, but it's a kid show, I guess. So don't worry about that.
It comes from deep inside of the earth. I appreciate
the ancient ones.
The ancient ones. I did appreciate that. I'll tell you. It's much appreciated because that's as goofy a way of explaining it as humanly possible. So
of course,
perfect for kids.
Yeah, the cryptic goof. I mean, that's what the show thrives on, is cryptic goofy.
Well, and again, I mean, if you really told kids what it was, they'd be horrified.
Dead dinosaurs.
All kind of just boiled up into a soup through time.
Delicious.
Yeah,
special
nothing wrong
drink.
with that. Yeah, the ancient one's special drink.
So obviously, after this whole 2D animation, which again is beautifully done, as you said, our transport teacher runs out of gas and dies. Very similar to a car. Very similar. I mean, obviously that's what it comes down to. Right. Red Guy, pushes forward as much as he physically can until he cannot. So it's interesting. So the car dies, but they could keep going.
Right.
And then then the teacher comes back to beg for gas. Right? Is that the timeline here?
I guess so, yeah. It's weird. The teacher dies, but they're still able to drive. They drive. I guess it's still a car.
I guess so. Going off of battery alone. Is that how that works? I know nothing about...
I don't know
enough about cars.
I mean, he's not an electric vehicle, best I can tell, because he's drinking Ancient One goo.
Maybe he's a hybrid.
Yeah, I feel like they would have said that, though.
Oh, who cares?
That's fair. I think it was smart to have the teacher in this episode be a bigger part, but also, I mean, as big of a part as they ever are, which is to say the focus of the episode, really. Like every time there's a teacher, they kind of are the focus of the episode.
Except for Jobs.
Yeah.
He left. He was gone.
But that was also because they had to really sell the audience on those characters. So that's the episode of this show, this run of the show, where we get to learn the most about the characters.
Fair. So yeah, they didn't want to focus too much on the teacher and establish a teacher being a reoccurring character.
Right.
So that makes sense. But I definitely think it's important to talk about, obviously now that Red Guy is driving the car and thinking that they're, a whole world of possibilities. Then the GPS comes in to also tell them 1,000,000 times to just go home. And that, sure, there are a couple of maybe a few safe places that they could have gone, but that's not where Red Guy wanted to go. And when the GPS was basically you guys should honestly just go home, Red Guy rips it out of the car. And I believe she said something along the lines of you're making a mistake, or something like you're going to regret this. You're making a mistake, which they did. They left the safety, and then reality broke down.
Or they broke through reality. It's not made clear what happens, really. Right?
Yeah. I mean, obviously there was a short amount of time where they were just parodying what it's like to be in a car in general.
Right. Which I feel like they got a lot of mileage out of.
Home movies, fucking, mileage.
I feel like, right? Like, I don't know.
You're not going to acknowledge your amazing pun just then?
I'm not going
acknowledge
to.
It.
Acknowledge it. Pun acknowledged.
Perfect.
I feel like they get as much out of the in the car sequence as they can, which leaves some funny bits that have nothing to do with the overall story. And that is very welcome in this show because we haven't had a lot of those moments. A lot of the show is just like go, 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 go. We got to get to the point. We got to get to the song. We got to get to the thing. And I like that this episode kind of just get to hang out with the characters a little bit.
It's interesting for an episode that's so much about going somewhere. This is like the longest they've stayed in a single spot, which is within a car.
Right. Totally. I totally agree. I actually really like this episode. Like, it's not much in the way of the message, which I'm okay with, but I think it
breaks away from that. Yeah.
Right. But I think it's more in line with the first episode, which was just getting to spend some time with these interesting, weird characters.
Right. So I think the next important thing is talking about Yellow Guy's dream sequence and why that existed and how that sort of ended. So, I mean, obviously, so Red Guy is trying to like talk up Yellow Guy to like this idea of going somewhere new. Yeah, at this point, Red Guy is fully accepted. Like, he doesn't even want to ever go home.
Right.
He was saying like they're going to live somewhere else. They're going to get new houses. They weren't going to live together, but that's okay because we'll have neighbors. And all of that to sort of quell all of Yellow Guy's fears and become complacent with what was going on. And then he continues to have this dream sequence of what it would be like to live in a community with more people, a more involved external environment. And there are a lot of kid shows that have that, you know, lots of kid shows that exist within like a small town.
Sesame Street.
With those reoccurring characters and the shops and this one's the postman and this is the, you know, store clerk, like the police officer. And so it makes me wonder, though, what was the purpose of that? Because the only thing I can think of is that it just led up to the ending gag of, oh, one of your neighbors wants to give you a gift. Oh, it's a rat or something. And it was like a bird. The bird flew away. And then Yellow Guy woke up to a bird flying into the car window, which, I mean, like, I like the transition. I thought that was really neat. But what was the point?
I think it was to show off the fact that they did a Rankin and Bass Animagic thing, because it was the Frosty the Snowman, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer style of animation where it's like little maquette puppets, right? Which is impressive.
Yeah, like with little wooden puppets, yeah.
Right, which is Animagic, Rankin and Bass. You've seen it if you watch those at Christmas time. It's that same thing. I personally appreciated it, but I think to your point, what a waste of 10 minutes. I mean, it wasn't 10 minutes, but it dragged and it feels like it just kept going on and on and on. And it's like, all right, we get it. There was two funny bits, the thing with the bird and the thing with Duck being a dog.
Yeah, Duck was a dog. That was interesting. Didn't understand the point of that one either, but I guess dreams are supposed to be weird.
I guess. I mean, he's the only one out of the three of them who is an animal. So
yeah. I do think the interesting thing, though, is that also the way that it ended, because I almost forgot, is that Yellow Guy gets hit by a car in the dream.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously there must be some kind of symbolism there. They're in a car. They're going somewhere. Yellow Guy gets hit by a car. There's something there. I just don't know what. There's a point that they're making there. There's a foreshadowing maybe that they're making there. I just don't know what it is. That I felt was pretty weak. Again, it just felt like an interesting jarring transition, which if that was all it meant to do, then it served its purpose.
Yeah. But it feels like a lot of time spent, right? Just for that. Like, I feel like there's a quicker way to get to that gag.
It felt a little self-serving, similar to the family episode.
Maybe it is self-serving. We've seen them be self-serving before, so it's not out of the question. Yeah. Few shows do it as well as this show does.
Does a bird flying into a window, I feel like that has some like ominous meaning, though.
Yes. Like in like horror movies and stuff, it totally does. Like,
what is like the
possession? Like, it normally signifies like the like the presence of like a demon or an evil spirit. Like, just thinking of things off the top of my head that come to mind: The Conjuring, Amityville Horror, like haunted house movies where birds are like attacking the house. I don't know.
Right.
Again, like maybe it's you know what? It's normally seen, like you kind of just mentioned, as like a bad omen. So
That's
maybe
what I would think is like it usually represents a bird flying into a window and dying.
portentous
is a bad
omens.
omen.
Yeah.
I just wanted to know if it went like deeper, if it was more specific than that. But I think you touched on something interesting. I don't know if this is the case, but saying that like the presence of something demonic, which I mean, like they obviously, like I think a lot of people would describe this show as relatively demonic, but
Or
it
at
makes me
least
wonder,
like evil adjacent.
but what are, you know, I guess it comes down to the mechanics of the world as a whole. What would it mean if there is a demonic presence in this show? Like, or is it just a bad omen? Because I could also see it just being a bad omen. And maybe we're not supposed to read that deep into it, but
I think it's a bad omen of like, because again, like the way the episode ends, they end up going as far as you can go, right? Past the edge of their world, seemingly into something else or the real world or whatever. Maybe it's true, again, similar to the sat nav trying to warn them to turn around, because the sat nav is like, to the moment it's being thrown out the window, like you said, it's telling them, turn around, don't do this, bad idea. And it's like, maybe that's what it is. But again, to what end? Because we don't, seemingly they make it back to their house at the end of the episode. So they're
solid, maybe.
Yeah. Again, the show is signaling to us that it understands the circularity of these narratives of start here, end in the same place. Like the show gets it, the show's commenting on it, but whether or not it actually is ever going to say anything about it other than shows do this, yes, we know that, remains to be seen. Because that's not that's not an astute observation to say TV shows that run for a long time or kids shows reset themselves every episode. Yes. Correct. Like there's so many TV shows that do it. It's not anybody can make that observation now. Like you've said, the show normally is at its best when it's operating in a subversive or interesting or new way, as opposed to just, yeah, duh.
Right. Huh.
And then that's kind of always my take.
Yeah.
It's like, and then what? Because everybody can make that statement, but what is your observation on that? So again, remains to be seen. They said, oh, everything ends up at the home. Okay, got it. Are they going to do, again, I probably end this the way I ended the last one. Where does this go from here? And now it's an even bigger question because they've revealed, now we have seen a human being in the show effectively.
Yeah, there is another hand that moves.
Right.
I suppose. That sounds like it was some kind of saying somebody said before.
Right. This is the hand that moves the car. Like, again, like we don't know.
That sounds like a
well, we don't know what the limitations and rules of this world are, but it's becoming very apparent very quickly that there is something else going on. What it is, we do not know. If it's benevolent, if it's not, if it's just, you just exist in this show, and if you are doing something against what the show is wanting you to do, you can break through. Like, again, I don't know, because the show really hasn't, even if we get into like the dark lore, I don't know how far it goes. Probably pretty far, I'm sure.
Okay, so what do you think is the better ending here in terms of, like, I feel like there are so many different like ways to take the whole, like, if you go against the status quo, like you can break free, you can enter the real world.
Right.
And or you could stay complacent and stay in the fake world. Which is better? Like, which would you be more commended to do? I feel like a lot of different, pieces of media take that differently. Like, oh, I could live in a virtual reality where everything is perfect, but I know it's not the real world, or I'll choose to live in the real world even though it's not perfect. And like, which of those choices is the right choice to make? And I guess that's sort of what I'm stuck wondering is, did Red Guy make the right choice to escape? Is that what we all would want him to do, want the trio to do, is escape? Because where they ended up, it doesn't seem at all better. If anything, it seems significantly worse.
Well, what is that commenting on is probably even the bigger question. What is the comment on, if you go against that and you get somewhere and it's worse, should you have just stayed home?
And that's what I'm wondering.
I mean, it's the Matrix, right? It's the same thing.
Sure.
Like, if you red pill yourself.
Red pill,
Right.
Yeah.
Blue
Red
pill
guy,
and you
red
stay
pills.
complacent. I mean,
Red guy, red
I
pills.
mean, again,
Yo.
hey, I wouldn't put it past them. But at the same time, like, again, I feel like the only thing that decides this is whether or not you know. If you know, if you can't tell that it's not real, like they say in Westworld, it doesn't really matter.
Right.
Okay, weird example. So they sell now at the store vegetarian Hot Pockets. Okay, like it's made by Dole or something, and it's, Philly cheesesteak, plant-based hot pockets, whatever the fuck, right? So we bought them at the store, and I tried one. And my comment to Kate was, I didn't eat Hot Pockets before, expecting to taste the quality of the meat. So eating this, which has a similar texture and tastes the same, should not upset anyone who eats a Hot Pocket. And frankly, Hot Pockets should disappear, and we should just eat plant-based ones, because you can't tell the difference anyways, because it's just kind of goopy. And it's the same thing. It's like, if I can't tell I was eating meat before, shouldn't matter that I'm not eating meat now. If they can't tell, I don't know if it matters, I guess. But I just don't know the way this ends. Will they be cognizant of that in the next episode? If they go back to the way everything is, will they be cognizant?
That's my last question for you. Do you think the next episode, like if you had to guess, if you had to bet money on it, do you think the next episode is going to start with them at home?
Mm-hmm. Yes. I think despite the show doing what it did, the best thing to do, what I would do, is have it open at home, not even acknowledge anything happened, right?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that would make the most sense, and it would leave us with so many more questions, which I think is what they want.
Exactly. And frankly, let's not kid ourselves, right? If we're writing this show, we get to the end of this last episode, we've fucking written ourselves into a corner that we should just get ourselves out of with a freebie. Like, right, we said that the show comes back to where it started, and that's exactly what's going to happen. We're like, what do you do with these three characters in a wasteland? Like, really? Like, we didn't even get to see Yellow Guy and Duck moving around freely because they're fucking puppets, and that's not how that works. We saw them on a couch or in the car where people can be hidden behind things and doing things. Red Guy is the only person that can even walk around, so I think ultimately they have to set it back at the house, but I don't even think there's a point in doing anything else out in the wasteland, because I think it's prohibitive to telling an interesting narrative. What, are you gonna have a bunch of shots of Duck's feet or something? Like, it's just there's limitations to this show that it gets around by changing the medium a lot of times. And I don't think it being real would be helpful for them to try to make a compelling show.
Sure. So I guess the question is, if the next episode does start at home, which I think is what we're both banking on, right, we would both bet money that the next the last episode is going to start with them back at home.
Right.
Do you think that any of the three of them are going to question it? Like, do you think that what happened in this episode is going to impact anything, and then like teachers are going to come in to try to distract them from it? Or do you think it's like, and that's like the story that they're trying to tell, is this like, they're characters that want to break out of the show, and they can't, and there's so many obstacles as to why they can't and why they shouldn't? Or do you really think that they're just going to introduce another teacher like it's episode 2?
Are they, again, the question, I guess, is a question I would have for you in response to your question is, are they trying to break out of the show? Red Guy was just trying to leave the house. I'm not sure he knew. Again, the question is, when they reset the episode, are they resetting even what they know? Because not necessarily, because they talk about previous episodes, right? He goes, hey, we had these teachers show up, and then Duck goes, like that guy. But do they remember the things that have happened? I don't know, because I don't even know if Red Guy knew that he was trying to leave, opposed to just leave the house, not leave the show. I think it'll reset. I think it'll reset like everything else, because it has already multiple times.
But like, what if it starts that way and then they remember, and then it stops being, like Red Guy saying, like, I just want to see something new. And it turns into Red Guy saying, what is this? What are we trapped in?
Right. I think a lot of the stuff that we've been seeing is for our benefit and not for the benefit of the characters, because it feels like we as an audience are making progress with the narrative and the characters in the show are not. Does that make sense?
Not
at all. Yeah. Like, they're not making progress in their own narrative, but we are seeing a gradual kind of revealing of what's going on, even if they're asking more questions ultimately by revealing the answers that we look for, which ends up being the way these things work. Rarely do you get an answer and no other questions asked, unless it's the literal final episode. And sometimes they don't even want to leave it at that. So I don't know. I mean, again, I think the next episode opens like they've all opened. Maybe they hinted something, but I think all of this is for us, the audience, and the characters have seen, if the first series and the second series are one and the same characters, they've seen stuff already and they're not commenting on it. So
I have one other theory, and this is kind of out there. Well, not that out there for the show, but like in terms of what they've been leading up to. What if this last episode is going to be like a meta making of Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared, like within the show's narrative? That's what I want. Like, you know, the same way that they showed, like, you know, Red Guy getting into the suit, like obviously like that was within the context of the show. So I'm not saying, and this is more so to get my point across to our listeners, but I'm not saying that it's going to be like an actual the making of Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared, or if it is, it's going to be a staged version, a scripted version of that for the sake of the narrative of the show existing within the universe of the show. But I'm wondering, like, if they're going to do that, like maybe they don't talk about the last episode at all. Maybe they don't start at the house. Maybe they start nowhere. Maybe it's just this is the making of Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. But obviously, like, it's all scripted.
That would be meta as fuck. I feel like that might be too much. I feel like that might be a little too much. That's
why I said, like, it's a little out there, but I feel like if I don't say it now and that's what it winds up being, I would have kicked myself.
That's fair. I think, you know, even with the way this show does it, and as someone who's watched a fair amount of TV like you have, it's hard to trick anybody anymore. It's hard to pull the wool over anybody's eyes anymore effectively.
We're very desensitized.
Right. We've seen everything a million times before, and everybody, you know, everybody who watches stuff like this, you know, is going to get something different from it, but there are going to be a group of people who watch this and want to know all the answers, and that's going to be their motivation for watching the show, is to decipher the clues and what, like you asked, what does yellow guy being hit by a car mean, and what does duck being a dog mean, like if it means anything at all. I would like to believe that the people who make this show have an idea at the center of all of this that they're striving for, they're trying to get across, and they will maybe eventually let the cat out of the bag. But I think for me, the journey will always be more fun than whatever the final answer is, because the final answer is it's not gonna satisfy anybody. It rarely ever does.
No, definitely not. Definitely not.
Like, would you be happy to have this written out clean and clear as day to you? No, it's not nearly as much fun to know what they're trying to say. It's more fun to kind of bring my own interpretation to it and see if I can get in the right direction, but I don't need it to be exact.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I was just watching this, like, I watched, you know, like YouTube Let's Plays, or this, I won't get into it. There's this one Let's Play that I've been watching with my boyfriend, and it's like gaslighting the game. And like, so the entire time we're thinking, like, what the fuck, like, what is the story, what are they trying to say, where are we, what is this? And then at the very end it's revealed that, like, this was all a simulation. And we looked at each other and we went, lame, so lame.
That's the new it was all a dream. That is the new it's all a dream. Like,
and like, because we were in this, we were like, there has to be some like crazy fucking reason that all this shit is happening. What is this story? What are they saying? And it was all virtual reality, and none of this actually mattered. And we were like, no.
it's the same cop out as this is all a dream. It's the same cop out.
So I'm with you. Like, sometimes the answer takes all the fun out of it. Like, I kind of just wanted this to be like just weird for weird's sake. And then like it wound up being like some like meta narrative on violence and like video games or some shit. I'll tell you about it later. But it was disappointing as fuck.
Well, and when you give people an answer, all of a sudden everybody's ideas become wrong.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, again, I don't know if, I don't know if certain creators care, because certain creators don't care, but there are plenty of creators that don't want people to lose whatever it means to them, whatever meaning they've assigned to it. And that's important to a lot of people, what they're getting out of it, as opposed to what the director is intending you to get out of it. Because people are going to get something out of things that they probably the director did not expect at all for them to get out of. And look, I watched Sherlock, and John Watson and Sherlock Holmes are pretty, gay characters, but they never go gay. And I get why the people who liked that show felt the way that they did. But it's like this, like, I don't know if there is anything actually going on until the creators of the show show me something really apparent or obvious. All we can do is sit here and theorize. And I think theorizing ultimately is better than having it just vomit it out. Just, okay, I got it now. Like, boring. Come on. Like, I don't need it spelled out for me. I feel like even with something like this, I've seen enough things. I have a good enough head on my shoulders that it's going to give me everything I need to really understand it. Right?
Yeah. So
maybe the last episode will be weird. Maybe it'll be some strange esoteric thing, and we'll be at the end of it going, holy shit, I didn't expect that. But I don't think it'll be that. It'll probably be a mixing of two things. I don't think it'll be all in one direction or all.
I agree. I feel okay. I feel like it's definitely going to start as something and end as something else. The same way that this episode started as something and ended as something else. I think they're going to do a setup and subvert that setup. And like, that's what they do best. But I feel like the first half is going to be, something that either we totally expected or didn't expect at all. And then the second half is going to be the opposite of that. And there's nothing we can do about it. And I'm hoping that it's done well, or else I'll be very disappointed. But I have a lot of faith in the show. I have a lot of faith in the creators. And even if this episode didn't mean anything, the fact that it didn't mean anything means something. And I like that. So I guess we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to look forward and see to spoil it for myself, but I am super excited to see wherever this ends up, because where this episode ended is kind of open-ended. So it could kind of go anywhere. I don't think it will go all the way into the realm of crazy, but this show has surprised us. It did with this episode. So yeah, the final time we're doing a SurrealTube on Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared, at least for this run of the show, we're going to be talking about the final episode of the show, episode 6, titled Electricity. And it'll probably be about nothing to do with electricity at all. Wager, I guess, frankly. So until then, you can find Emma and I over at weirdingwaymedia.com, where this show is found, along with all the other shows that you would want to be listening to. That's where you can find them. As for this show, ScaryStoriesWeTell.com, Scary Stories WT on all social medias. Big thanks, as always, to Maggie the Odd and Dustin Rutledge for the album artwork for the show. You can find Maggie the Odd over at DolanMuseum.com, and to our good friend Alex Malnack of Blondo. You can hear his music at the beginning and the end of this show. Just search Blondo on Spotify. As always, we'll let our good friend, the former host of Sightings, Mr. Tim White, lead us out.
No mystery is closed to an open mind.